Cartagena, a city in southern Spain that opens onto the Mediterranean, is one of the oldest ports of antiquity. The city is home to 220,000 inhabitants. It was founded by the Phoenician Carthaginians in 200 BC. By initiating sea trade between peoples, the Phoenicians sparked Mediterranean civilization. Over the centuries, the number of shipwrecks increased. Remains from these wrecks are housed in a specially dedicated location, the Aqua Museum. Arc as in archaeology, and aqua as in subaquatic. With rooms featuring glass, water, and light, the Aqua Museum is built like a boat. Afloat on the waters of history, it displays to the public collections of objects brought up from the depths of the sea. Shipwreck after shipwreck, Aqua recounts the struggles of the sea. Its museum display cases reveal the saga of the navigators who shaped our civilization. Traveling the Mediterranean and the entire planet's seas, they created the contours of our world, risking their lives in the process. Observing the sea provides an overview of how man has conquered the entire Earth.
My name is Isaac Perel. You've probably never heard of me, but I invented the first submarine in history. It was in 1888. I was fascinated by the sea and wanted to explore the ocean depths. Because the sea is temperamental, and over the centuries, it's helped itself to a hefty tithe of the wealth it carries on its waters. What it has swallowed it keeps, forever silent down in its depths. Come with me, take a plunge into the midst of the waters and discover the treasures it has housed for centuries.
So, Patricia, I wanted to show you this very important anchor. It's the oldest anchor discovered to date and belongs to the family of what's known as a constructed anchor.
This boat and its state of conservation, unique in the world, are unlike anything ever seen before. So Ivan Neguarella, who discovered them, decided to leave everything intact on the seabed. Each piece has been reproduced by imprint. The display in the museum is a total replica.
An amphora for fresh water, a few chewed bones left over from their last meal, a basket for grain, 2 stones to grind the flour for their daily bread. The unfortunate sailors appear to have abandoned everything here, as though it were yesterday.
What we're most sure of are the physical and chemical aspects of dating information. Firstly, there is the amphora. It is typical of the second half of the 7th century BC and appears to be of Western manufacture. The form of the edge and the curve of the handle prove that it is from 650 to 600 BC.
The tragedy occurred 7 centuries before Christ, when 3 sailors were swept from the deck of their ship. Carried away by currents, they were unable to get back to their ship, which sank. Nobody knew anything about the tragedy until the ship was discovered 2,700 years later.
With their lightweight boats, Phoenician crews never ventured far from the coast. They set out from Lebanon to explore the Mediterranean, where they established numerous trading posts. The oldest objects retrieved from digs bear witness to a sophisticated lifestyle. The Phoenicians initiated the first trade between the peoples of the Mare Nostrum.
The engravings on this popular ring and these sacred hands indicate that the Carthaginians believed in the god Baal.
Baal was the king of the gods. He was the lord of fertility and the possessor and protector of humans. The Greeks are thought to have taken inspiration from Baal to give birth to Zeus. For over 1,500 years, the Phoenicians came and went on all coasts of the Mediterranean. During the era of Christ, they transported elephant ivory from North Africa to the Near and Middle East. The numerous elephant tusks discovered off the coast of Cartagena shed light on the richness of Phoenician civilization. These merchant sailors developed the first cultural exchanges and shaped the Mediterranean of pre-antiquity. But such power and wealth was inevitably the target of jealousy. Rome, the new rising power, drove the Carthaginians to war.
Who doesn't recall Hannibal and his war elephants? It was in 218 BC, 500 years after the shipwreck of the Aqua boat.
From Cartagena, the Phoenicians' base in Spain, Hannibal launched an expedition against Rome. But his fleet of ships had been weakened by war, and he had no choice but to invade Italy via land. A skilled strategist, Hannibal used elephants as tanks, which sent waves of panic through the Roman ranks. Hannibal's great invention was a commando action. To attack the Romans from all sides, he created shock troops, which were few in number but perfectly trained. When Hannibal arrived in Rome, 90,000 lost their lives. But while Hannibal was endangering Rome, a Roman fleet sailed across the Mediterranean and attacked the stronghold he had set out from. Besieged and pillaged, Cartagena became Roman.
Cartagena did not surrender in a day. The last remaining soldiers defended the city to the bitter end. It took 8 days of bloody fighting in the streets for the Romans to take the city. Legend has it that the queen, Hannibal's sister, refused to surrender. She set fire to herself and her sons in front of the Romans as they entered the gates of her palace.
After a few decades of raging war, the entire Mediterranean had become Roman. The city of Cartagena became a wealthy mining and wine-producing province. Every day, its port would teem with boats from all 4 corners of the Mediterranean in an incessant flow of traffic. The sea, as usual, applied its levy.
This Roman ship was transporting a cargo of 250 amphora of Spanish wine, probably bound for Narbonne.
Once the cargo has arrived, the archaeologists can set about studying the structure of the boat, a process that is key to understanding how naval architecture evolved over the centuries. The wreck is so well preserved that the crew can raise part of it to the surface, a rare godsend.
After 2,000 years spent under the sea, a simple piece of wood can either confirm or revolutionize a great deal of historical knowledge. Each piece brought up to the surface is a veritable treasure, an additional clue to understanding where a boat has come from, where it was constructed, and what it was used for. Although the wine this ship was transporting has dissolved into the sea, in the future, archaeologists will be able to recount its forgotten history. Each new wreck discovered revives the tales of the sailors who perished there, and their memories are finally reborn.
Oil lamps and finely carved glass goblets that only a skilled craftsman could make. This was the era of Pax Romana and Christianity, a period of refinement and a certain luxury. We are at the beginning of our era, about 500 years AD, and the city of Cartagena is now connected to the rest of the Mediterranean basin by constant trade. Boats are getting bigger and becoming steadily safer to sail. Exchange is on the increase. Archaeologists affirm that at the time, maritime traffic in the Mediterranean was 4 times busier than it is today.
Despite the progress made in navigation, all sailors still feared certain dangers. At the confluence of the Gulf of Lion and the Spanish coast, gale winds blew and opposing currents clashed. The area around this headland resembles an underwater cemetery. Yet the greatest number of archaeological remains don't come from former shipwrecks.
To weather storms, sailors often sheltered in the middle of small bays. Archaeologists had explored several of these bays until they came across the most famous of them all, the Bay of Aigua Blava, known as Ali Baba's Cave of the Sea.
Many crews would shelter in the small bay. Storms could be relentless, and so to save their lives, they preferred to throw their cargo overboard rather than sink with it. Thus lightened of their load, they could carry on their sea journey. Over the centuries, so many ships' crews unloaded this way that the bottom of the bay is covered with broken crockery, tools, and sometimes rare marvels.
Look what we found. It's written, sweet oil. You can read it perfectly.
Yes, it's wonderfully well preserved. Perfect. That's the first time I've seen an amphora like that.
And here, this African amphora looks incomplete. And look now.
It fits perfectly. So is that an African amphora?
Yes, and we think it contained wine.
Although at first sight, these hundreds of amphora may look just like each other, each one has its own history. The shape of a handle or the thickness of a contour gives us clues as to whether they came from Africa, Greece, Gaul, or Spain. They all recount the same history, that of a people united by strong commercial and cultural exchanges in one and the same area, the Mediterranean.
A 1,000 years have gone by, 10 centuries of navigational progress, and just as many exploits by sailors. The most daring among them discovered and conquered America, opening the door on new trade prospects.
Now that it had branched out from the enclosed space of the Mediterranean, Spain started opening up new routes. Firstly, the route to America via the Atlantic, followed by the route to Asia. Trade crossed the Pacific Ocean, then Mexico, by land. Boats were loaded up again at Veracruz before heading for Europe. From then on, as well as the riches of the Mediterranean, those of the Far East also reached Europe. The 16th century witnessed a first type of globalization, with the birth of various influences of styles that reached the very pinnacle of refinement. The Arqua Museum's display cases are bursting with objects of Eastern origin that are painted and decorated in the American style. Some pieces are very rare, such as this inverted rhinoceros horn, entirely sculpted by Chinese craftworkers. Also from China came these pieces of porcelain with their inimitable designs and colors. One French craftworker created a silver cover for this Chinese carafe, which he topped with a coin from 1792 bearing the head of King Louis XVI.
A Chinese pot transformed by a French jeweler. The continents were brought closer together under the sole force of navigators. Thanks to them, inestimable riches crossed the oceans. Some of these riches were lost at sea as a result of shipwrecks. And sometimes, despite having sunk to very great depths, incredible treasures are exhumed.
In 2007, Ivan Neguarella, director of the Arqua Museum, along with the rest of the world, heard that an American treasure quest company had just exhumed, from a depth of 1,800 meters, a cargo of coins unlike any seen before. They claimed the cargo came from an American ship, the Black Swan. But the Spaniards were not convinced. For Ivan Neguarella, the fact they came from a North American ship did not add up. Whether the ship was called the Black Swan or not, what was it doing off the coast of Gibraltar carrying such a precious cargo? And why was it transporting 600,000 Spanish coins? A lengthy period of research begins for the researchers. If an American boat had transported such vast sums of Spanish money, there must be traces of it in the museum archives.
Such large sums of money circulated on the oceans that even whole nations succumbed to pirating. In addition to Spain and Portugal, 3 other maritime powers were fighting for the supremacy of the oceans: Holland, England, and France. It was not uncommon for boats to engage in fighting far out at sea, taking advantage of the absence of witnesses. But why would a treasure like this one be on board an American ship? The investigation into the ship's real identity was to take a decade.
The crew of underwater archaeologists visits the location of an English shipwreck that had been involved in the wars between Spain, England, and France.
War was raging in Europe. By virtue of the former non-aggression agreements, Napoleon remained Spain's ally. Together, they faced England's expansionist ambitions. At the time, Napoleon and his army were stationed in the city of Tarragona. The English were trying to remove him.
Although we do not know the name of the boat lying here at the bottom of the water, we do know it sunk in 1813. It was not a warship, but a rear-line vessel. Its purpose was to follow the English Army and Navy, carrying supplies, uniforms, support equipment, and ammunition. This shoe has already been treated. The process involved was the same one used to dry wood.
Although they faced enemies, those navigators were still all sailors, like myself. A ship's bell is its soul. It sounds the hours, periods of work, rest, and meal times. It alerts the crew to the presence of winds and fighting. We sailors live with the constant taste of salt on our lips. On stormy days, the taste travels down into our throats. On days of fighting, it descends to the pit of our stomachs.
As the dig progresses, archaeologists raise the intact hold of the wreck and 8 tons of ammunition. They also discover buttons of uniforms, where we can still distinguish the arms of the Royal English Navy.
And the inscription on the barrel?
It's wonderful. Thanks to this lid, we now know it belonged to Company Number 3. Musket balls, 500 of them. And that the crate was sealed in October 1870.
That's precise information.
And as these barrels had remained closed, what did we find in them? Exactly 500 musket balls.
A job well done.
After a decade of research, the archaeologists finally discover which boat was transporting the treasure off the coast of Gibraltar. It was not American, but Spanish. Comparing various letters and mission orders from the archives, the researchers succeed in establishing the links between the naval battles of the time and the treasure.
The crux of matters such as these lay in war and peace alliances. That of this particular treasure dates back to the Peace Treaty of Amiens, signed by France, Spain and England in 1802. The treaty provided for the free circulation of ships and the end to the blockade that had been stifling the Spanish economy. At the time, a ship's captain, José Bustamante, was ordered by King Charles IV of Spain and his queen, the Princess of Bourbon-Parma, to arm 4 frigates, one of which was called the Santa Maria de la Mercedes. His mission was a secret one, to bring new money reserves from America. The geographer Diego de Alvear, accompanied by his wife and their 7 children, were among the 248 victims of the Mercedes. Documents from the time provide researchers with the proof. The ship was laden with 600,000 pieces of silver and 250 pieces of gold. The tragedy took place on the morning of the 4th of October 1804. The Spanish frigates were located at a day's sea journey from Gibraltar when an English cannonball struck the Mercedes right in the center of its gunpowder supply. It exploded and sunk on the spot.
It has been proved that the treasure belongs to Spain. An international court order obliged the Americans to return it to them. The thousands of coins are kept in the reserves of the Arqua Museum in the suburb of Cartagena. The 600,000 silver coins date back to the late 18th century. They had slumbered on the seabed for over 200 years. Many of them are well preserved. The coins are all given careful attention. Each one of them is logged and accompanied by a detailed description of its condition, weight, minting date, and origin. Some coins suffered damage when the Mercedes exploded. The Arqua Museum restorers must remove any remaining traces of gunpowder from them, and sometimes traces of charring. Each coin takes several hours to restore in what is a painstaking process. This is a huge task for the Arqua Museum. It will take 20 to 25 years to restore all 600,000 coins. As the coins were originally placed in bundles in cloth bags, then enclosed in wooden crates with drawers, many of them are still stuck together. Separating them could damage them, so the curators of the Arqua Museum have opted to put them on public display just as they are. The naturally rot-resistant gold coins have lost nothing of their original shine. Gold and silver coins, officers' tobacco pouches deformed by the explosion. The treasure from the Mercedes so far has been estimated at a value of 300 million euros. It is the greatest known value for any underwater archaeological treasure. Yet, for archaeologists, wood, terracotta, gold, silver, or any other vestige wrested from the depths of the sea bears the same value, that of historical knowledge. For the curators of the Arqua Museum, all this outstanding treasure belongs to one sole entity: World Heritage.